The countdown started at 0300 station time, and by 0347, I had already done the thing they said couldn't be done. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Cadet Mara Voss, service number 7 Tango 9 Kilo 2, assigned to the Galactic Coalition Academy's forward training station Helix Bravo, currently orbiting the third moon of Verathroman 4 at an altitude of 400 kilometers above a world that smelled, according to the older cadets, like burning copper and old rain. I had never been to the surface. I had never fired a weapon outside of simulation. I had never, in my 19 years of existence, killed anything larger than a spider I found in my bunk during my first week aboard. That changed on a Tuesday. Humans are particular about Tuesdays. I don't know why. The day doesn't mean anything in the galactic standard calendar. It's just another rotation marker, a label slapped onto an arbitrary increment of time. But for reasons I cannot explain even now, the worst and best things in my life have happened on Tuesdays. My mother's accident. My acceptance letter to the Coalition Academy. The Tuesday I met Commander Vrethkow, the 7-foot, 4-armed Dranaki officer who became the closest thing to a mentor I'd ever have. And now this Tuesday. 0300. I was awake because I am always awake at 0300. Humans at the Academy learn quickly that sleep is a luxury distributed unevenly, and that the best time to be alone with your thoughts, or to avoid them entirely, is the deep middle of ship night, when the corridors are quiet and the recycled air smells slightly less like 60 species breathing the same oxygen. I was in the observation corridor on Deck 9, sitting on the floor with my back against the cold alloy wall, reading a physical book, actual paper. My grandmother had pressed it into my hands at the shuttle port on Earth when I left for the Academy 18 months ago. For when you feel lost, she'd said. I had not opened it until 3 weeks ago. I had been feeling lost for approximately 18 months. The book was a collection of old human military memoirs. Not the sanitized kind, the raw kind, written by people who had done hard things and needed to put the weight of them somewhere outside their own skulls. I had been reading the same chapter for 3 consecutive nights, not because I didn't understand it, but because I understood it too well. The chapter was called The Moment Before. It was about the seconds leading up to the first time a soldier does something irreversible. I heard the alarm before I felt it, a subsonic pulse that the station's environmental systems use for alerts too sensitive for open broadcast. It moved through the floor and up through my spine before my ears registered anything at all. Then the lights in the corridor shifted from white to amber. Amber, not red. Red was full emergency. Red meant everyone to stations. Amber meant something was happening that command hadn't classified yet. I closed the book. The station's internal comm crackled 3 times, the signal for priority but not panic. And then the voice of Senior Watch Officer Lemathse came through, calm and precise in the way that only Thalari officers could manage, their species having evolved in a predator-heavy environment where emotional display attracted unwanted attention. All senior staff to Tactical Room 1. Cadets remain in quarters or assigned positions. Repeat, cadets hold position. I was neither in quarters nor an assigned position. I was on Deck 9, unauthorized, with a book about soldiers doing irreversible things. I had approximately 6 seconds of internal debate. Then I stood up, tucked the book under my arm, and walked toward Tactical Room 1. This is the part where I should explain something about myself that most people, most species, find difficult to process. I am not brave. I want to be clear about this. What I did that night was not driven by courage. It was driven by something much smaller and much more specific. It was driven by the fact that my assigned bunk was on Deck 6, and the fastest route to Deck 6 from Deck 9 passed directly by Tactical Room 1. And if something was happening that warranted an amber alert at 0300, I wanted to know what it was before I went back to sleep. Humans are curious the way some species are carnivorous, not as a choice, as a fundamental orientation toward the world. I told myself I was just passing by. I told myself this very sincerely, right up until I stopped outside the tactical room's secondary observation port, a narrow window set into the corridor wall, designed for maintenance access, and pressed my face against the glass. Inside, I could see 8 officers clustered around the central holographic display. The display showed the station's surrounding space in tactical overlay, every ship within sensor range rendered as a colored point of light with a trailing vector line. Most of the points were familiar: the 3 Coalition patrol vessels running their standard circuits, the ore freighter docked at Base 7, the diplomatic courier that had arrived yesterday from the SCIFI delegation. And one new point, close. Much closer than anything should be, without triggering the outer perimeter alert. It was running dark. Dark meant no transponder signal, no identification, no response to hails. In Coalition space, running dark was either a technical malfunction or a declaration of intent. The unknown vessel was not malfunctioning. I could tell this because it was moving, not toward the station, not directly. It was moving in a holding pattern, a slow elliptical orbit that kept it just inside the shadow of the moon's albedo reflection, where passive sensors had the most difficulty resolving detail. Whoever was flying that ship knew exactly where the blind spots were. Commander Vrethkow was at the center of the cluster. I recognized her even from behind, the distinctive backward-articulated knee joints of her species, the 4 arms currently clasped in the Dranaki posture that humans had learned to translate as controlled urgency. She was speaking to Watch Officer Lemathse, gesturing at a section of the holographic display with 2 of her arms, while the other 2 pulled up data overlays. I couldn't hear them through the glass. But I didn't need to hear them to understand that this was not a drill. I should have gone to Deck 6. I want to be honest about this. Every reasonable thing in my brain was telling me to go to Deck 6, get in my bunk, pull the thermal sheet over my head, and let the adults handle whatever was happening in Tactical Room 1. I had been at the academy for 18 months. I was a second-year cadet. My weapons certifications were current on 3 platforms. My tactical scores in simulation were, and I say this not from pride but from simple documentation, consistently in the top 4% of my cohort. I had cross-trained with Vrethkow's advanced seminar on non-standard engagement scenarios, specifically because she had told me 6 months ago that I process spatial problems differently than any cadet she had seen in 30 years of teaching. You do not see the problem as it is presented, she had said. You see the problem as it will be in 4 seconds. This is either a gift or a danger. Which one? I'd asked. I do not yet know, she'd said. Neither do you. I stood at the observation window for 43 more seconds. Then the ship running dark made a course correction. It was subtle. If I hadn't been watching the holographic display through the window with the full and complete focus of someone who had been reading a chapter called The Moment Before for 3 consecutive nights, I might have missed it. The vessel shifted its elliptical pattern inward, just slightly, just enough to reduce its distance to the station by approximately 12%. It wasn't approaching directly, it was tightening the orbit. And attached to the station's exterior, at docking port 4 on the far side of the structure, was the diplomatic courier from the SCIFI delegation. The SCIFI ambassador was currently asleep in guest quarters on Deck 3. I thought about the orbit. I thought about the dark ship. I thought about the fact that the ambassador's security detail consisted of 4 SCIFI honor guards and 2 coalition MPs, and that a vessel running dark and tightening its orbit at 0300 was not doing it to say hello. I stopped pressing my face against the observation window. I went to find Commander Vrethkow. Part 2, 4 seconds. The tactical room door requires a senior officer's biometric to open from the corridor. I do not have a senior officer's biometric. What I have is a maintenance override code that I learned by accident 4 months ago, when technician Gralvoth accidentally said it aloud during a systems repair I was assisting with, and which I have never used and have never told anyone about, because the Academy has very clear policies about cadets in unauthorized spaces, and I have been very careful to follow every Academy policy except the ones I have broken. I entered the code. The door opened. 12 eyes turned toward me. Of the 8 officers in the room, the species distribution meant that several of them had more than 2, so the effect of 12 eyes locking onto a second-year human cadet who had just walked through a secured door at 0300 was approximately as welcome as I'd expected. Commander Vrethkal's 4 arms went still. That was how I knew she was very angry. With Dranaki, stillness is not calm. Stillness is the predator response. The moment when a species whose evolutionary history includes hunting prey across kilometer-long plains of ice decides that the situation in front of it requires complete attention. "Cadet Voss," she said. "Commander," I said, "the dark vessel, it's tightening its orbit. I think it's targeting the diplomatic courier, not the station." "Silence." "The SCIFI ambassador." "Cadet," her voice was not loud, "you are in a secured tactical facility without authorization." "Yes, Commander. The vessel shifted its orbit 4 minutes ago." I have the timestamp from the display I observed through the secondary maintenance window. I pulled out my personal data tablet. I calculated the new trajectory based on visible vector change. At current tightening rate, the vessel reaches optimal intercept position for the docking port in approximately 90 minutes. More silence. Watch Officer Lemeth made a sound that in Thalari expresses something between surprise and recalibration. Vrethkal looked at my tablet, then she looked at me. The forearmed stillness broke, her upper left arm reached out and took the tablet. She examined it for 6 seconds. "Your calculation," she said, "is 4 minutes ahead of what our tactical system just computed." "I was watching the display longer than the system was running that specific algorithm," I said. "You were watching through the maintenance window." "Yes, Commander." "Before you entered without authorization." "Yes, Commander." She handed the tablet back. Her upper arms folded in a posture I had learned, over 18 months of close observation, meant, "I am choosing not to address the secondary problem because the primary problem requires my attention." "Show me your intercept model," she said. I showed her. The rest of what happened in the next 40 minutes was above my clearance level, and I was present for most of it anyway. This is a pattern in my life that I have noticed. The dark vessel was identified through a combination of passive spectral analysis and some method the intelligence officer wouldn't explain as a Virath compact courier ship, a small, fast vessel used by a fringe political faction that had been making increasingly aggressive statements about the SCIFI delegation's negotiations with the coalition. The faction believed the negotiations would destabilize trade routes they considered proprietary. They were not technically a military organization. They were also, apparently, quite willing to do military things. The vessel was carrying 3 individuals. The plan, as the intelligence officer eventually laid out, was a boarding action through the docking port, cutting the electromagnetic seal at the junction between the diplomatic courier and the station's airlock, creating a 3-second window to move personnel through before the emergency bulkhead sealed. From there, they would reach guest quarters on Deck 3, and whatever happened after that was something nobody in the tactical room said out loud, but everyone understood. The problem was the timing. The 3-second window at the airlock junction would be created by a device attached to the exterior hull. The device was already there. It had been placed during the ore freighter's docking cycle 6 hours ago. A routine docking that had created exactly enough sensor noise to mask the placement of something the size of a small case of ration bars against the outer hull. "We can send a team to the exterior to retrieve it," said the tactical officer. "EVA prep takes 22 minutes minimum," said Lemathse. "We have 90 minutes. "We had 90 minutes 6 minutes ago," I said. Everyone looked at me again. "I've been recalculating as we talk," I said. "The vessel corrected its orbit again approximately 3 minutes ago. It's not 90 minutes anymore, I checked my tablet. 71. Vrethkal turned to the tactical display, ran the numbers, looked back at me. 73, she said. 72 by the time we finish this sentence, I said. She made the sound Dranaki make when they are acknowledging something they find genuinely inconvenient. EVA prep cannot be compressed below 22 minutes without critical safety compromise, said the tactical officer. So we have 50 minutes of margin, said someone. No, said Vrethkal quietly. We do not know what triggers the device. It may be proximity-based. If the vessel moves inside a certain threshold, the device activates regardless of timeline. The room went quiet in a way that rooms go quiet when everyone is understanding something at the same time. What's the threshold? Someone asked. We don't know. I looked at the holographic display. I looked at the vector lines. I looked at the device's estimated placement on the outer hull, marked now as a small amber dot on the station's exterior schematic. Deck 9, I said. What? Said Lemathse. The device is adjacent to the outer hull section accessible from Deck 9's maintenance corridor. The EVA lock on Deck 9 is a single-person emergency egress unit. Prep time for a single-person suit is 4 minutes, not 22. It's not rated for full tactical operations, but it's rated for hull access and basic manipulation. Silence. Cadet, said Vrethkal. It's a retrieval operation, I said. Not an engagement. Go out, find the device, physically remove it from the hull, return to the lock. No weapons required. Single operator. 4-minute prep. You are a second-year cadet. I am the only person in this room who has completed the Deck 9 emergency egress certification in the last calendar year, I said. It's a quarterly elective. Most officers don't recertify because the emergency lock is considered a last resort system. I recertified 11 weeks ago because I stopped. Why? Said Vrethkal. Because I was bored on a Sunday afternoon and it seemed interesting. Because I wanted to understand the station's non-standard systems, I said. Vrethkal looked at me for a long time. Her forearms moved through a sequence of positions I had never seen before and could not yet classify. What, she said very quietly, is the failure mode if you cannot retrieve the device? I abort, return to the lock, and you have lost 4 minutes but gained the information that the device is fixed to the hull more securely than expected. And if the device activates while you are on the exterior? I thought about this honestly. The device is electromagnetic, not explosive. If it activates, it disrupts the airlock junction seal. I am not at the airlock junction. I would be at the device's location, which is 11 meters from the junction. The M-pulse radius is unlikely to reach me. Unlikely? I don't have the device's spec sheet, I said. None of us do. Another long silence. Watch Officer Lemathse said something in rapid Thalari that the translation matrix caught as. The cadet's logic is structurally sound, and the risk differential favors the attempt. Vrethkal closed all 4 of her hands simultaneously. I had never seen her do this before. I later learned it was a Dranaki gesture of transferring weight, the physical expression of accepting responsibility for a decision. You will take a comm unit, she said. You will maintain continuous contact. If I say abort, you abort immediately, regardless of your assessment of the situation. Yes, Commander. You will not engage any personnel. If the vessel moves personnel to the exterior, you disengage and return. Yes, Commander. You will not be commended for this, she said. You entered a secured facility without authorization. That is a disciplinary matter that will be addressed when this is resolved. Yes, Commander. Go, she said, 4 minutes. I went. Part 3, the exterior. The Deck 9 emergency egress lock is exactly what the name implies. An emergency option, small and utilitarian, and cold in a way that the rest of the station manages not to be. The suit stored there is a Mark 6 single-operator EVA unit. Older than I am, patched in 3 places, helmet seal rated to Coalition standard but not beyond it. I had put it on 11 weeks ago in a recertification drill that had taken me 5 minutes and 40 seconds from empty-handed to fully sealed. I did it now in 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The lock cycled for 90 seconds. I spent those 90 seconds doing what I always do when I am about to do something that my body is reasonably concerned about. I counted. Not a countdown. A count forward. I have found that counting forward is better than counting backward in high-stress situations because backward implies an ending, and endings make the body want to stop, and I needed my body to keep moving. 1, 2, 3. The outer lock opened. I have been outside a station hull twice before, both times in calm conditions, daylight cycle, full training supervision. Both times I was attached to the hull by 2 independent tether systems and had an instructor's voice in my ear telling me every 10 seconds that I was doing fine. This time the voice in my ear was Vreth Cal's, and she was not telling me I was doing fine. She was silent, which was somehow both more reassuring and more serious than anything she could have said. Verath's third moon filled approximately 40% of my visual field below and to my left. The station's hull curved away from me in both directions, a field of alloy panels and antenna clusters, and the dark, irregular shapes of sensor arrays. The lights were off on this section of hull ambient light only, the pale reflected light of the moon mixing with the faint luminescence of Verath Roman 4 itself on the far side. It was, in the way that genuinely dangerous things sometimes are, very beautiful. Cadet Voss status, said Vrethkal's voice. Exterior, moving to device location. Tether secured, maglock boots engaged. Copy, you have 64 minutes on current timeline. The vessel has not moved. Copy. I moved along the hull in the way you move in maglock boots. Lift, swing, press, feel the clunk of the lock engaging, lift again. It is not fast. It is methodical. It is, if you do not think too hard about the 400 kilometers of atmosphere and surface below you, something close to meditative. I counted my steps, not to measure distance. The suit's navigation system was tracking that, but to keep the forward rhythm going. Forward, always forward. 11, 12, 13. The amber dot on my suit's HUD was 41 steps ahead. I counted to 41. The device was smaller than I expected. It was roughly the size of a hardback book, my grandmother's book, I thought, and then pushed that thought aside. Matte black, attached to the hull panel at 4 corners by magnetic clamps. The clamps were the non-explosive kind, designed for detachment rather than destruction. The device's job was the pulse, not the physical damage. I could see where the ore freighter's docking crew had accessed this panel during the 6-hour loading cycle. Fresh scoring on the hull panel's edge where a tool had slipped slightly. Someone in a hurry but not panicked, professional. Device located, I said. 4 magnetic clamps, standard attachment pattern. I can see the clamp release mechanism. Assessing. Copy, said Vrethkal. Do not touch until you have fully assessed. Understood. I assessed. The thing about explosive ordnance disposal, which I have studied in exactly 2 elective modules at the Academy, both theoretical, neither practical, is that the first principle is, Understand what the device wants to do, not how it does it, what it wants. Every device has a logic. Follow the logic backward and you find the vulnerabilities. This device wanted to create an M pulse at a specific moment. For that, it needed a trigger. The trigger could be time-based, proximity-based, remote command-based, or some combination. If it was time-based, removing it before the trigger time was sufficient. If it was proximity-based, moving it might trigger it, but moving it away from the airlock junction would reduce its effect even if it triggered. If it was remote command-based, removing it would interrupt the antenna connection and likely be interpreted as a trigger event. Commander, I said, I need a piece of information. Ask. Does Coalition Intelligence have any data on this faction's preferred trigger mechanisms for hull-mounted devices? A pause. I heard voices in the background, rapid consultation. 18 seconds, said Vrethkow. I waited, I counted to 18. Time primary with proximity backup, she said. Remote is the least common in their documented incidents. They prefer passive systems. Time primary with proximity backup. What's the proximity threshold in their documented devices? 30 meters, she said. That is the most common specification in recorded incidents. I looked at the holographic overlay on my HUD. The approaching vessel was currently at 2,000 meters, inside 2,000 and tightening, but not inside 30. Not yet. Then I need to remove the device now, before it reaches that threshold, I said. Agreed. Agreed, she said. Proceed. I reached for the first clamp. The clamps released cleanly, one by one. Clockwise, the way magnetic clamp releases always work on Coalition-adjacent hardware, because the standards body decided, 40 years ago, that clockwise was the direction and nobody has changed it since. This is the kind of institutional consistency that saves lives in situations like this one. Clamp 1, 2, 3. On the fourth clamp, I felt something I had not expected, resistance. Not the resistance of a stuck mechanism, the resistance of something actively engaged. The fourth clamp was not just holding the device to the hull, it was connected to something inside the hull panel, a secondary circuit, a filament, thin as wire, running from the clamp base through the panel's maintenance access seam. Commander, I said, and my voice was very calm, and I was very proud of this calmness. The fourth clamp has a secondary connection through the hull panel. I cannot determine if this is a trigger circuit or a monitoring circuit without additional equipment I don't have. Silence. Options, said Vrethkow. Option 1. I leave the fourth clamp connected and remove the device physically, accepting that the filament will either break or pull with the device. If it's a trigger circuit, this might activate it. If it's monitoring, it will simply register the removal. Option 2. I trace the filament into the panel and attempt to interrupt it at the hull side junction before releasing the clamp. This takes longer and requires opening the maintenance panel. Time on current approach to 30-meter threshold, said Vrethkow. A pause, she was checking. 19 minutes, she said. Opening a maintenance panel in EVA gloves takes time I did not have. Not 19 minutes of time. Not without risking threshold breach. Option 1, I said. The logical inference from time primary trigger preference is that the filament is monitoring, not triggering. A trigger circuit on the fourth clamp would make the device more complex and failure-prone. This faction's pattern is simple and reliable. You are making a significant inferential leap, said Vrethkow. Yes, I said. You are aware of the consequences if the inference is incorrect. Yes, I said. The decision is yours, Cadet. That was when I understood something important about Commander Vrethkow that I had suspected but never confirmed. She did not say the decision is yours as an abdication. She said it as a recognition. She had run the same calculation I had run. She had reached the same conclusion. She was choosing to let me carry the weight of it rather than carrying it herself. Not because she was unwilling, but because she understood, in her 30 years of teaching cadets, that there are moments when a person needs to own their first irreversible decision. The moment before, I thought. I took a breath. I released the fourth clamp. The filament went taut for 1/2 second as the device came free of the hull, and then it snapped, and the snap sent a tiny vibration through my glove, and I held the device in both hands and nothing happened. No pulse, no alarm, no cascade of consequences. "Device is free," I said. "No activation event detected." The silence from the comm lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Vrethkal said, "Return to lock." Part 4, what happens after? I was back inside the lock before the Virath compact vessel reached the 30-meter proximity threshold, which, as it turned out, didn't matter anymore, because with the device neutralized and its activation window closed, the vessel's operators made a series of increasingly frantic course corrections over the next 18 minutes before a Coalition patrol interceptor that had been running silent on the far side of the moon broke its cover and moved to intercept. The vessel was boarded. 3 individuals were detained. The SCIFI ambassador was never woken up and did not learn about any of this until the following morning's briefing, at which point she said, in the formally precise diction that SCIFI diplomats use even when expressing something approximate to profound relief, that she would be including a formal commendation in her next report to the Coalition. The commendation was not for me. It was for Station Command collectively. But that is fine. That is how these things work. What happened to me, personally, was this. At 0700, after 4 hours of debrief that I was present for in an increasingly unofficial capacity, Commander Vrethkal dismissed the officers, waited for the room to empty, and then stood in front of me with all 4 arms in a posture I had never seen before and could not yet classify. "You broke 3 station regulations tonight," she said. "I know. You entered a secured facility without authorization. You accessed a maintenance egress system outside of your operational clearance. You made a unilateral field decision on an active device without explicit command authorization. You said the decision was mine." "I did," she said. "That was also a regulation violation on my part. I considered this. Are we both in trouble? Regulation violations in the context of a successfully neutralized threat to an allied diplomatic mission," she said, and I could hear something careful in her voice, a precision that was doing work, "are evaluated differently than regulation violations in ordinary circumstances." "That's not a no." "It is not a no," she agreed. "There will be paperwork. There will be a formal review. Your academic record will note the violations. None of this changes." "Okay," I said. She looked at me with the full attention of a species that evolved to see in 4 spectral ranges simultaneously. "Why did you release the 4th clamp?" I thought about this honestly. Because the math was better than the alternative. The math gave you a 70 to 80% confidence interval based on incomplete intelligence, she said. That is not a certainty. "No," I said, "but the alternative was leaving the device on the hull and hoping the timeline held, which was maybe 50%. 70 beats 50. Most people in their first live field situation choose the option that feels safer," she said, "regardless of the mathematics." "I know," I said. "Why didn't you?" I had been thinking about this since the moment the filament snapped. I had been trying to identify what exactly had moved through me in that half-second between taut and broken, what mechanism in my brain had made the choice before I was fully conscious of making it. "I think," I said slowly, because I'd been reading about it for 3 nights. "Reading about what?" "The moment before doing something irreversible," I said, "and the thing the author kept saying was that the worst part isn't the act. The worst part is the waiting. The longer you wait, the more the fear compounds. And once the fear compounds past a certain point, the math stops mattering. Vrethkal was very still. So I said, didn't wait. She made a sound I had heard from her once before, a low harmonic resonance that her translator matrix had declined to interpret, which I had always assumed was a Dranaki expression without coalition language equivalent. I still don't know what it means. But she nodded. Part 5. The naming. In the Dranaki tradition, and several other species represented on Helix Bravo, it turned out, had analogous traditions that the coalition's cultural advisors noted with something between academic interest and mild alarm. There is a practice surrounding an individual's first significant act. Not first kill, specifically. That translation is the one that got lodged in the report and subsequently into the story, and it's not wrong exactly, but it's reductive. The Dranaki concept is broader. It encompasses the first time an individual demonstrates that they will move in a specific direction when the world requires movement. The first time a person's nature becomes visible in a crisis. First emergence is closer to accurate in the coalition's multi-species translation framework. But first kill is what stuck, because what I killed, functionally, was the operation, the plan, the entire carefully engineered sequence of events that 3 individuals had built and placed into motion over what must have been weeks of preparation. I killed it in the time it took to release 4 magnetic clamps. Seconds, 4 sets of seconds. The naming happened at 1900, just before the station's standard evening meal period, in the common hall of Deck 2. I was not told it was happening. I was told that my debrief continuation had been moved to the common hall, which should have been suspicious, but which I accepted without question, because I had been awake for approximately 40 hours at that point, and my critical facilities were running on fumes, and the residual adrenaline of having done something irreversible without being destroyed by it. The common hall on Deck 2 serves as the station's social center for all 60-something crew members and 18 cadets. On a normal evening, it smells like 14 species worth of food preparation and sounds like the productive chaos of beings who live in close quarters and have, mostly, learned to coexist. On this evening when I walked in, it was quiet. Everyone was there. All 60-something crew, all 18 cadets. The SCIFI ambassador and her honor guard, which I had not expected and which caused me to stop in the doorway. Commander Vrethkal was standing at the far end of the hall. "Come forward, Cadet Voss," she said. I came forward. She spoke in Dranaki for approximately 3 minutes. The translation matrix gave me fragments, ritual language, the kind that has specific ceremonial weight that doesn't fully survive the journey into other languages. I caught first emergence, what the darkness revealed, the character of one who acts before the fear compounds. Then she switched to coalition standard. "In 31 years of teaching cadets," she said, "I have observed many individuals in their first genuine field moment. Most perform adequately. Some perform excellently. Rarely, I observe a cadet who performs in a way that tells me something not just about their training, but about what kind of person they are becoming." She looked at me directly. "What I observed tonight tells me that Cadet Mara Voss sees not the moment as it is presented, but the moment as it will be in 4 seconds, and that she acts on that vision rather than waiting for the world to confirm it." She reached into the pouch on her left lower hip, Dranaki formal, where includes several pouches, ceremonial holdovers from a species that once needed to carry tools at all times, and removed a small object. It was a data chip, the kind used for official record annotation. She held it up. The Dranaki tradition of the emergence name is not a coalition standard practice. I am not requiring any present to adopt it, but I am exercising my right as commanding officer of this training station to add an operational annotation to Cadet Voss's record. She paused. And as a Dranaki individual, I am also doing something slightly outside my official authority, which I note for the record so that nobody is confused about the distinction. Somewhere in the assembled crew, someone made a sound that might have been a laugh. The operational annotation, said Vrethkal, notes that Cadet Voss's performance tonight was characterized by early independent analysis ahead of tactical system computation, correct threat reassessment under time pressure, rapid preparation using non-standard but legally available resources, and successful device neutralization under conditions of incomplete intelligence and significant personal risk. She inserted the chip into the hall's record terminal. The personal notation, she said, which is Dranaki and informal and carries no official coalition weight whatsoever, is this. She looked at me. A thing that moves without sound before you understand it has already arrived. A thing that arrives before you understand it has already decided. You are being given an emergence name. You are not required to accept it, but I offer it because it is true. The hall was very quiet. Death Whisper, she said. I did not understand this immediately. In Coalition Standard Translation, it sounded alarming, the kind of name that would concern a personnel officer reviewing a cadet's file. But the Dranaki word she used, I would later learn, had a more specific meaning. The thing you do not hear until it has already happened. The arrival that precedes its own announcement. Because, said Vrethkal, the threat was over before it knew you were there. The Skethali ambassador, who had been standing to the side in the careful stillness of a species with very good diplomatic instincts, stepped forward and said something to Vrethkal in Skethali. Vrethkal's translation matrix rendered it, and she relayed it in Coalition Standard. The ambassador says, in Skethali tradition, the person who stands between the knife and the sleeping is given a name that belongs to the household they protected. She offers you the name Velshara, which means, approximately, the quiet door. 2 names, I said. It appears so, said Vrethkal. Is that normal? Very little about tonight has been normal, said Vrethkal. I do not see why we should begin normalizing at this stage. Epilogue. What I kept. The disciplinary review took 11 days. I received a formal notation on my record for unauthorized facility access and non-standard egress use. The notation was appended, per coalition regulation, with the operational context that had generated the actions. Anyone reading my file would see both things simultaneously, the violation and the reason. Vrethkal's report, filed separately, described my tactical analysis as demonstrating cognitive processing patterns consistent with accelerated threat modeling, approximately 4 to 6 seconds ahead of standard computational assessment. It recommended me for advanced tactical cross-training, and noted, in the final line, that this cadet's most significant characteristic is not her analytical capability, though that capability is considerable. It is her willingness to act on an analysis before the analysis is confirmed by external authority. I read that line 4 times. I think about it often. In the locker beside my bunk, I keep 3 things I consider essential. The emergency egress recertification card from Deck 9, which I renewed again the following quarter. The data chip from the station record terminal, which Vrethkal gave me after the ceremony as a personal copy of the operational annotation, and my grandmother's book about soldiers doing irreversible things, which I have now finished. The last chapter is called The Morning After. It's about what happens when the irreversible thing turns out to have been the right thing, and how you carry that differently than you expected, not as relief, not as triumph exactly, but as a new weight that is simply part of you now, like a bone that healed after breaking. Stronger at the fracture line. Changed in the specific shape of the break. I am 19 years old. I have done one irreversible thing. I am, according to Dranaki tradition and Skethali custom, and the operational annotation on my official coalition record, Death Whisper, the quiet door, the thing that arrived before it was heard. I go to Deck 9 sometimes, at 0300 when the corridors are quiet. I sit with my back against the wall near the emergency egress lock. I don't always read. Sometimes I just listen to the station settle and hum around me, 60 species breathing recycled air, a small constructed world holding its shape against the void. And I think about the 4 seconds between when I saw the orbit change and when I understood what it meant. 4 seconds. Everything happens in 4 seconds, if you're watching the right thing. I am learning to always watch the right thing. == End of story. Word count, words. Estimated runtime, minutes at 160 WPM. == Phase 2 packet. == YOUTUBE description. She wasn't supposed to be there. Cadet Mara Voss was on Deck 9 at 0300, reading a book, minding no one's business, when the station's sensors picked up a dark ship tightening its orbit around a sleeping ambassador. Command didn't know she was watching through the maintenance window. They didn't know she'd already calculated the intercept timeline 4 minutes before their own systems did. By the time Commander Vrethkal sent her to the hull alone with a 4-minute EVA prep and a device that might or might not kill her if she touched it wrong, they were starting to understand what kind of person Cadet Voss was. The ship's operators would understand it too, right after it was already over. This is a story about what happens in the 4 seconds before someone becomes who they're going to be. HFY Sci-Fi Military Sci-Fi Space Opera, Human Cadet First Mission Alien Academy, Found Family. #blog. HFY Humanity Fuck Yeah Sci-Fi Military SCIFI Space Opera HFY Stories Alien Academy Human Cadet SCIFI Shorts Reddit HFY Unrated Space Station First Mission Galactic Coalition Sci-Fi Audio. Keyword string. HFY Story Human Cadet Alien Academy Humanity Fuck Yeah Military SCIFI Human First Kill SCIFI Story HFY Space Station Thriller Alien Commander Human Cadet HFY Audio Story 2025 Sci-Fi Short Story Narrated Human Outsmarts Aliens HFY Reddit HFY Best Stories HFY Found Family Alien Space Opera Human Tactical Genius SCIFI Death Whisper HFY Cadet Story. Thumbnail prompt. Visual mode, cinematic wide. Exterior hull. A lone figure in a white and gray single-operator EVA suit crouches on the curved exterior hull of a massive space station. The suit is utilitarian and slightly worn, patched at the shoulder, helmet visor showing a faint amber HUD glow from inside. The figure's gloved hands are positioned over a matte black rectangular device attached to the hull by 4 visible clamps. One clamp is mid-release. Below and behind the figure, the pale curve of a moon fills the lower third of the frame, ghostly blue-white, enormous, close. The station's hull curves away into darkness in both directions. No sun visible, ambient moonlight only, casting long soft shadows across antenna clusters and panel seams. In the far upper right background, barely visible against the stars, the dark silhouette of a small unmarked vessel drifts in slow orbit. No lights, no markings, just a shape against the void. The overall mood, intimate, tense, still. One human alone on the hull of a station doing something that cannot be undone. No text overlay, no explosions, no dramatic light beams. The danger is in the silence and the scale. The figure is small against the station is small against the moon is small against the stars. Color palette. Cool blues and silvers of moonlight, warm amber from the suit's HUD glow, the deep matte black of the device. High contrast between the lit hull surface and the star field beyond. ==